That painting is like, I got you, bitch. That's what that is.
Oh, right.
You got a president who was on the flight logs 26 times with Epstein, and you got that guy in a dress in your house.
What's up, guys? It's Benny. There's no such thing as coincidences in this world. If you want to find the truth, you just have to look a little deeper, and typically it's just sitting right there. Donald Barr. You ever heard of him? Here's a little history lesson for you. Donald Barr got his career start in the Office of Strategic Services. This, of course, was the precursor to the CIA during World War II. What would eventually become the CIA was one of the pet projects of Donald Barr, who believed in the unified theory of government. What's that? That's the theory that the deep state, as we know it today, should just continue on. There should be a government that just never has to answer to the people, never has to be confined by the boundaries of a republic or constitutional order, that there should be permanent bureaucrats forever in charge. And he helped found that system. Donald Barr is also the man who groomed Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, who was not particularly smart, didn't graduate college, got a job from Donald Barr at a special school called the Dalton School. Jeffrey Epstein taught there and was groomed by Donald Barr, who was also an author. What book did Donald Barr write? He published Space Relations. This is a book, a science fiction novel. Don't worry, it's all science fiction, not grounded in the real world at all, about a planet ruled by oligarchs who engage in child sex slavery. Got it. Yep. Epstein Madame Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father was also deep intel for Mossad, well, they put the two together, and the rest is history. Meaning literally history. Meaning like, will we ever see the documents? Maybe this is why we won't ever see the documents. Donald Barr is also, ironically, the father of Bill Barr, who was the Attorney General when Jeffrey Epstein was murdered in his cell in federal property, was allowed to be murdered by a foreign country. Sources tell us. Yeah. I really wonder, ladies and gentlemen, what that foreign country could be. Well, Ghislaine Maxwell's father was given a state funeral in Israel. Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was a secret agent with the Israeli government, worked for Mossad. This is well documented. And actually was straight up killed under very mysterious circumstances when he got on the wrong side of that relationship. So anyway, these are just realities. These are just facts. What am I reading from? Am I reading from InfoWars? No, I'm reading from Wikipedia, dude. You can just straight up find this stuff out by just looking. And there's a guy who's a professional noticer. I call it professional noticing, right? Space relations. Look at this. Amazing. Oligarchs who engage in child sex slavery. Isn't that something? There's a guy who's a professional noticer. His name's Ian Carroll. He has a YouTube channel. Big on X. He's got 1 million subs on X, right? I've been following him for a while, and he just does like kind of breakdowns of the truth, like of what's going on. But I think you'd probably call him like a professional researcher more than anything. And he just has the guts to straight up say the truth about various subjects that might be uncomfortable for some people. Like, is Jeffrey Epstein alive? And he said this on the Joe Rogan podcast. Joe Rogan's podcast is like the biggest platform on earth. He was invited on the Rogan podcast and talked about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, given the incredible amount of specificity in which he talks through Jeffrey Epstein's relationship to the intel services and foreign nations, you would assume that all of this is true. And then you go and research it yourself, which is why I pulled up the Wikipedia page. What's my source? Wikipedia. That's why I pulled up the Wikipedia page. Like, you can just find this stuff out. But Ian Carroll is the guy who's ballsy enough to say it. And when Joe Rogan asked, what was Epstein? What was actually going on there? Ian Carroll just dropped truth bomb after truth bomb after truth bomb. Here we go.
All the information that's getting disclosed, supposedly this administration, what do you have the least faith that we're going to come to
Epstein,
a conclusion?
for sure.
Epstein.
And I think it's because of Israel. I think that because I mean, when you really dig into Epstein, his entire network was Israel. It was clearly like Ehud Barak was the ex-prime minister and the ex-head of Israeli intelligence. Leslie Wexner was one of the most powerful pro-Israeli philanthropists. The whole organization was Israel.
So
and I'm not saying it was all of Israel.
It was all an intelligence gathering and
it was targeting Americans. It was targeting American officials and the American president.
Right.
And the CIA does have interest in those targets too. Elements in the CIA does. Certainly they had help from the CIA, and certainly they had help from these other organized crime and intelligence operations. But you don't like, so for example, Dan Bongino, the new deputy director of the FBI, he recently had this clip that went all around where he said on camera that he had a source that he trusted deeply. And he's an informed guy. He was at a Fox News interview, and the source told him that Epstein was working for an intelligence agency in the Middle East. And I don't know which one, but someone in the Middle East. And to be fair, we all already knew this. We already know who he worked for. At least I think so. But I'm looking at, okay, Dan, so if this giant group of Jewish billionaires is running a sex trafficking operation targeting American politicians and business people and stuff, you think they're working with an Arab or Muslim nation in the Middle East? Like, you think that Leslie Wexner is devoting his entire life to philanthropies on behalf of Israel, but then he's going to work for Saudi Arabia when he's doing this trafficking ring?
Right. But if someone says to him that they're all working for a country in the Middle East, knowing he knows what that means, but not specifying, doesn't he kind of have to repeat it that same way?
Well, he also has to repeat it the same way because he won't get the job if he says Israel.
Exactly.
Because Israel has so much control over our government right now. And I'm not saying that all Jews are in on something. Clearly, internet. Thank you.
Internet.
And Joe is definitely not saying that.
Definitely not.
But the Israel's government is as vulnerable to the deep state effect as the American government. But I would argue that Israel's government is way more vulnerable to it because of the people that founded Israel and the way it was founded. It was founded in a modern time, much more recently, by it was a revolutionary founding. And I can totally sympathize with the Jewish desire to have that state. Like, I get it. But because of the way that happened, the people that founded Israel were a bunch of organized crime figures in America, the Jewish mob, that were helping with money and with arms trafficking to get the guns there because they had to have guns. And it was the Rothschild banking family sending a whole bunch of money and getting the declaration in the first place. And then the people that were there, the three different organizations, the Irgun, the Lehi group, and the Haganah, those were the three paramilitary groups that fought to found Israel, and they're like the heroes of Israel, which I understand the narrative that they're heroes, but when Israel was officially founded, they officially designated Irgun and Lehi as terrorist organizations because they had been bombing civilians. They'd been bombing British civilians. The first official act of terror before they changed the definition was the bombing of the King David Hotel, where these terrorists, these Lehi and Irgun terrorists, a bunch of different groups, the guy who planned that bombing later became the prime minister of Israel. They were bombing civilians. So when those are the groups that are fighting to found that nation, even if all the Jews there are wonderful people, the leadership is inherently composed of these people that have been deeply corrupt for all time. And so you get this fertile ground for this kind of deep state effect to take power. And when you start to research the heads of state of Israel over history, you realize that a bunch of them were in those groups doing those terrorist acts and have done a bunch of dark stuff because those were the people that were at the top of that military organization. Those terrorist organizations reformed to form the IDF.
And what's interesting is you can talk about this now, post October 7th.
It opened wide open.
Post Gaza.
You want to know a funny story, actually? I didn't know shit about it. And I started doing 9/11 stuff. And I was doing a 9/11 video on my YouTube. And I knew about the Dancing Israelis conspiracy theory that is very much a real set of documents. And I knew that I'm not allowed to talk about Israel for some reason. And I didn't really know why. And I realized I better understand this thing before I crater my new channel and career on this topic I don't understand. If I'm going to take a stance against Israel at all, I should understand why and how. So I started doing research, and I shelved that research, and I switched to researching Israel and Palestine and the history there and what's going on. And I finished the video, and it was October 6th. And I was like, I was very worried because it's you weren't allowed to talk about it. And I had just made this whole documentary about the history of Israel, Palestine, and the propaganda and what it all was. And I published it on October 6th on my Locals channel. And I kind of had this lean back and if that's the end of the ride and I get canceled for this so be it. And then literally the next day, and I'm not saying that October 7th was a good thing, but I'm saying that literally the next day, the entire internet was ablaze about Israel and Palestine, and everyone was talking about it. Wow. And it was the weirdest coincidence. And suddenly it was like, oh, all right, let's dig this thing open. Because unfortunately, it is, I think that the state of the Israeli influence that sustained them for so long, that was essential to them surviving this long, I think that it has grown cancerous to the Jewish faith in general, because Jeffrey Epstein is the perfect example of this. Jeffrey Epstein was the world's most prolific and evil sex trafficker that we know of so far, ever. And he very clearly was a Jewish organization of Jewish people working on behalf of Israel and other groups. And so that's a dark stain on Israel and on the Jewish people if you own it.
So, yeah, there's almost too much there to completely unpack. They also go on to wonder if Jeffrey Epstein is actually still currently alive, and if perhaps they had just faked his death. Just want to note one or two quick things. One, the bombing of the King David Hotel. Yes, this happened, and it was Zionist terrorism that was happening. 91 people died, in fact, in this murder and mass bombing of this hotel by a militant right-wing Zionist underground organization called the Irgun during the Jewish insurgency in 1946. This, of course, was just in the years, like the year after World War II. These were people, this was a organization that had to be labeled a terrorist organization by the eventual state of Israel. The hotel were the central offices of the British Mandatory Authorities of Palestine. So they were bombing British armed forces, effectively. So let's head over here to Robert Maxwell. If we're going to go after Bill Barr's dad, might as well go after Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, right? Robert Maxwell, who ran a publishing company, was suspected of being a foreign agent and a secret agent or a double agent or a triple agent. He engaged in massive arms deals all across Europe, many of these arms deals benefiting the nation of Israel. And he had links to British Secret Intelligence Service, the KGB, and the Israeli intelligence service, Mossad. 6 serving and former heads of the Israeli intelligence services attended Maxwell's funeral in the state of Israel. Okay. Israeli Prime Minister eulogized him as he has done more for Israel than can be told today. It sounds like something they're trying to keep under wraps. What can you, what else do you say? Shortly before Maxwell's death, former employee of Israel's military intelligence directorate was planting stories in the British media that he was, in fact, an agent of Mossad. Okay. Very interesting. Listen, what's your crazy sources on this? Wow, Wikipedia. It's like you just find this stuff out. You just go Google it yourself and connect the dots yourself. Man. Yeah. It becomes quite obvious. And then finally, there's an FBI document that straight up says that Epstein is a source for us. So is this why? The Epstein documents may never be revealed? We're not sure. You should go listen to the full Joe Rogan podcast yourself with Ian Carroll. Go, listen to it, right? But I'm telling you that we've had members of Congress on our show, like Matt Gaetz, saying a foreign government killed Jeffrey Epstein on American soil. Matt Gaetz told us that. Made huge news. And every single time we ask, we get closer and closer to the truth, like we asked former FBI agent who did intel on the show, Kyle Sefrin, what was Epstein? And he's like, oh, yeah, it's a sextortion scheme by Mossad. And they do this all the time. So does every intelligence agency. Okay. Is that why we're never going to see it? Because there's just too many liabilities. That's why we're never going to see the truth. There's too many liabilities. Foreign governments, entire intel agencies, all the structures built up together in order to protect this operation. And what's the operation? The contiguous government theory, the deep state, the theory that cements the deep state, that we're in charge and the people are not in charge. But the people are in charge, which is why we'll keep pushing for the release of these documents. because you can't actually have a real country without it. We have to know the truth. Eventually something's going to crack, and we're going to get it. All right. Well, at least Joe Rogan's up, asking questions. Ian Carroll's answering, and you can do the research for yourself. We're Benny. Like, share, and subscribe.